Good morning. It's a great morning on these streets right here. This small little portion, this little street, this little block, this little neighborhood that we've carved out here on the Odd Shopper channel. One that is called on the map, Shander's NBA Parlay of the Day. And look what we've done. We've turned this small little idea into now 3 NBA parlays we've hit over the last 11 days, including, and not to be forgotten, last night. Good morning. Everything tastes like money. Everything smells like money. I was going to wear all blue today, but I figured, you know what? I'll let the man do the talking for me. Hey, we're only as good as our next video, right? So I can sit here bragging all I want. The reality is you came here for picks. Who the hell cares what you did yesterday? I missed the damn video. Give me some picks. Okay. Head on over to DraftKings. I got you. We're going to do it again. We're going to build another 3-leg winner here. On top of that, I'm going to ask you to do what? Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe. Couple of things. One with DraftKings, the other with our Discord. But let us begin with the Atlanta Hawks as a money line favorite. This is moving. Earlier when I built this on DraftKings, this was plus 110. It is now plus 120. Okay? The Atlanta Hawks are this bad right now. They are a road dog, against the Charlotte Hornets. Now, some of this has to do with Clint Capella being out. We already know DeJounte Murray's out, so you're not really going to do anything different there. As far as line movement, people are going to look at that. Oh, Clint Capella, Hornets have a shot. The Charlotte Hornets are abysmal. They are flat out brutal. They suck. They're one of the worst teams, not only by choice, but by effort. It's one thing if you're there by choice and you've built up guys that you're there designed to lose basketball games. Look, the obvious end here would be that Trae Young drops 60 and the Hawks find a way to eke this thing out. 238.5 is a monster total, so expect no.
happening, everybody? Welcome to the Stokastic NBA Strategy Show. We're heading into the weekend with a 10-game NBA slate, and I'm actually pretty happy about how the schedule is this week, because Adam and I have talked about this a few times while we've done shows together, is that the NBA at one point, they were going to a little bit more of balanced scheduling, but they've gotten away from it this year. But this week, 10-game slate on Wednesday, 10 on Friday. We had a decent Thursday slate. We're not dealing with these 2-game slates and 13-game slates, so I like this as you guys come in. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Adam, what is happening?
Yeah, I'm with you. I haven't looked ahead, so I don't know how long this lasts, but I have enjoyed the schedule this week and looking forward to getting to tonight because I was telling you before the show, last night kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Finished 4 points out of first on DraftKings with the best John Wall lineup, who played 0 minutes in the fourth. So, not real happy right now. So looking forward to new games.
And something else that kind of works out well with the scheduling is we've got a lot of sports coming up. So we got the 10-game NBA slate today. We've got a Saturday NFL slate. We've got a Sunday NFL slate, which obviously the Sunday NFL slate par for the course, but 3-game Saturday slate. So if you guys have not signed up for Stokastic yet and want to take advantage of our 3-day free offer, I really do think now is a good time to get in the door because you're going to get the 10-game NBA slate tonight and 2 separate main NFL slates. So this is probably one of the best values possible you could get to use that 3-day free trial. So if you haven't signed up at Stokastic yet, take advantage of that. And you do get 3 pretty big significant slates for the next 3 days. But let's start talking about tonight's NBA slate, Adam, starting with the Atlanta Hawks against the Charlotte Hornets. And Trae Young isn't on the injury report, so that's nice. But we do have DeJounte Murray out. We've got John Collins out. How do you like getting to Trae Young, considering some of his struggles as of late?
Yeah, I mean, he has struggled recently, but I don't want to read too much into it. We know he is supposedly banged up, I guess. So, maybe that's influencing it, but it's always a situation where, like, I can't really do anything about it because you really have no way of distinguishing, is he actually hurt? Is he just coincidentally playing poorly? And also, even if he was playing poorly because he's hurt, is he still hurt? So it's kind of like you just have to roll with it and hope it turns around. He should be a very good play with DeJounte Murray being out. His rates go up. He's going to use like every possession that Atlanta has. So I'm certainly looking to get right back to him and hopefully he just plays better than he has been. Another good matchup here in what should be a high scoring game against Charlotte.
Yeah, and then also I forgot to mention Clint Capella is out as well. So you just start to look at Trae Young, who he was more expensive than this at times when DeJounte Murray was healthy.
Yeah.
So we just have to assume there's going to be more usage going to him. And Trae Young, while he has had some struggles as of late, it's a little bit, I think, overblown. It's not like he's totally sucked from a fantasy perspective. We just haven't seen the real ceiling games from him as of late. I think this is a time where we should see a good matchup against the Hornets. We've got all these other key players out for the Hawks. So Trae Young is someone who I'm going to be paying up for quite a bit. Now in the front court, let's talk about Onyeka Okongwu, because with no John Collins and no Clint Capella, how big of a role are we looking at for Okongwu?
I expect 30 plus minutes from him. He typically has played that in games where he has started. He's 4,700, so the price tag has come up a bit. But I thought Capella sat last game.
He did sit last game.
Okay, so what the hell am I looking at? Popcorn Machine has Capella in.
No, last
And
game. Oh, no, it was 2 games ago that Capella sat.
Oh, right.
That's what
yeah,
that's
right.
what I'm misremembering. Right.
Yeah.
So
because
he actually
Trae
did
Young killed
return
me
last game.
Yeah,
2
now
games
I
ago.
remember. Yeah, so in that last game, you got 28.5 minutes from Okongwu, but that was also the game where they got destroyed by Memphis, so he didn't play down the stretch. I expect that you're getting 30 plus minutes from him. He's about a point per minute guy. There is still value there at 4,700.
Yeah, so this is just to reiterate, we had, because it was a little bit bizarre in terms of Clint Capella was questionable last couple of games. He ended up playing on December 14th against the Magic, but sat December 12th against the Grizzlies, and now he's hurt again. It looks like he's going to be out for a couple weeks here. So it's going to be Okongwu starting at center. But like you said, Adam, there's no real center competition minutes. Like, he's going to take on the role that Capella pretty much played before. And when we've seen him be a starter in the past, he's a points per minute guy. And even though he hasn't been super successful as a starter this year, 32 minutes per game. So it's reasonable to think he scores somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 fantasy points, especially in a matchup against the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah. Now, who else from the Hawks stands out considering all their injuries?
I mean, Bogdanovich still looks reasonable. His price tag finally jumped on DraftKings to 6K, but you once again got 31 minutes from him last game. I think you're just going to see him live in that 30-plus minute range. He's about a fantasy point per minute guy. He should be on the floor for every minute that Trae Young is not, which obviously means DeJounte Murray's not out there either. So you have the offense really running through Bogdanovich for those minutes, and then he's playing a supporting role for Young in the other minutes. I still think he's a solid option at 6K. Not the same level of priority that he was at 5K or 4,500, but the ownership's going to come down as well. We don't have ownership in yet, but he's not going to be 60% owned now that the salary jumped. So it's kind of a trade-off where he still looks like a good option. DeAndre Hunter had a really big game last time out. He finally played more minutes. We had seen him kind of limited his first couple games back from injury, but then he played 38 minutes in their last game. So I do expect him to play more as well. He's not the most exciting option, but you do expect more playing time in a good matchup for him. And he's still sitting at just 5,100.
And as you noted the other day, the minutes for Bogdanovic have ramped up so quickly. So first couple of games, they said he was on a minutes limit and that it wasn't going to get changed. And then all of a sudden he's playing 34, 36, 31 minutes the last 3 games. So no minutes concerns as far as Bogdanovic goes, despite him coming back from a knee injury. Anything else you want to mention from the Hawks?
No, I don't think so.
All right. So now we move to the Charlotte Hornets. And just like how Bogdanovic had a fake minutes restriction, the same could be said for LaMelo Ball, who I don't know how many minutes he would have played if he didn't foul out last game, but he ended up playing 34 minutes. The game went to overtime. He didn't play in the overtime because he'd fouled out before then. There is 0 minutes restriction to speak of when it comes to LaMelo Ball here. I think we feel pretty good about that. How does that make him look as a pay-up option?
I think it makes him look great. He's only 8K, and I have no idea how this guy is 8K when he's playing full minutes. And we did once again learn that playing shorter stints does not mean minutes restriction. It means playing full minutes and then probably a couple extra. So good to know moving forward that apparently that's just the thing across multiple coaches is that what that means. So no reason to be worried about his minutes. And I had said going into that game that I wasn't overly concerned because when they brought him back from a long absence last time, he played like 28 in his first game, but it was a game where he was in foul trouble and lost minutes. And then he just immediately played like 34 or 35 the next game. So it does make me comfortable that I think they just wait until he's good to go and bring him back. So I feel confident in his playing time today. Obviously, foul trouble with him is an actual concern. He manages to do it a lot, which is impressive for a guard. Normally, you don't have to worry about that. But at 8K, I mean, you're just talking about such a good point per minute fantasy guy that is likely to play 32 plus minutes. It's really, really tough not to like him, especially, again, in a game that has such a high total. So far this year for LaMelo, he's only played 131 minutes, but 1.16 DraftKings points per minute. If you go back to last year, I think he's higher than that. Double checking now, but I believe he's higher. So he looks really good.
Yeah, and then something else to consider as well, a little bit easier of a matchup than it would typically be for LaMelo. DeJounte Murray out, Clint Capella out. Those are people that are key cogs for the Atlanta Hawks defense. And then just going to be drawing a one-on-one matchup against Trae Young, who's one of the worst individual defenders that are in the NBA. Now, other news that we have on the Hornets, Gordon Hayward is questionable, kind of out of nowhere. He was expected to be out for a while, and then all of a sudden he's questionable on the injury report today. If he's back, who does that impact really, if anybody, from the Hornets?
I'm not positive. I assume it sends Kelly Oubre back to the bench, and you get Oubre playing that like sixth man role that he was playing prior to Hayward's injury. So with Oubre at his current $7,500 price tag, it would make him, I think, pretty much unplayable because, Oubre is basically a fantasy point per minute guy. But the thing that's been really nice about him recently is that you're just getting him playing 36 plus minutes on a night to night basis. If he's coming off the bench, it's likely that he still plays a lot of minutes, but probably not 36 plus. So it's going to just be a spot where he's now overpriced. Hayward also, cuts into the production of somebody like Terry Rozier a bit, as does LaMelo coming back. So you also get that situation with Rozier where I expect him to play a lot of minutes, but he's kind of priced for LaMelo and Hayward to be out. Not to say he can't have a big game at 7,800, but on a 10-game slate, when you have LaMelo back and assuming you have Hayward back, it is a spot where it's just going to be really difficult for me to get to Rozier, whereas if those guys were still out, I think he would look great.
And then what happens with the rest of the Charlotte team? Because now that we have LaMelo healthy and apparently not having any kind of minutes restriction, guys like Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre, they are more expensive. Are any of them really appealing now that LaMelo is back in the picture?
No, I don't think so. It's just that, they're still going to play a big role here, especially Rozier. I expect him to still play really big minutes, but so they're going to have that upside, but it's just that they're priced now over their median as opposed to being in line with it because LaMelo does cut into their production. And also to touch back to a previous point, 1.34 DraftKings points per minute for LaMelo since the start of last season.
So let's move on to the Sacramento Kings. They are taking on the Detroit Pistons. And starting with the Kings side of the game, this is still something that's eating at me, Adam, because a couple of days ago, Kevin Huerter gets ruled out after lock. Terrence Davis becomes a massive chalk play. And I had trouble projecting him extremely well. just because the last time we had seen him start, he only played, what was it, 15 minutes in that same spot. And then he was also really popular. I had other guys that were projected pretty similarly to him. So I didn't really end up playing a whole lot of Terrence Davis. And I didn't even feel wrong about it in hindsight because he only played 24 minutes. He just happened to have a 30% usage rate and picked up a lot of peripheral stats as well. So once again, if Kevin Huerter is ruled out and Terrence Davis starts, it's going to be hard for me to project him for a ton of minutes. But what would you be making of the situation?
Yeah, so I mean, like that was a really interesting spot to me. He ended up being my highest owned guy on that slate, but then I just ended up getting in the thread in like a debate with Eric and Jesse on Twitter because Eric, of course, is victory lapping it like it's some can't miss play, and I'm like, dude, he played 15 minutes last game. Like he very easily could have failed here, and he's clearly not. And then Jesse, of course, is on the other side saying he's over 10% owned, you can't play him. Because that's his thing. But so like he was my highest owned guy, but I wasn't comfortable with it because it was very likely that Malik Monk was going to close over him. And you also had the situation where if he's playing poorly, those minutes could potentially go elsewhere also. We did see Monk close over him, even though he was, Davis was playing well. So I think you project like 24 to 26 minutes if he ends up starting. He has been extremely good on a point per minute basis so far this year. He's averaged 1.21 DraftKings points per minute overall, 1.12 in 163 minutes with De'Aaron Fox on the floor. But my issue with just looking at that is that, like in those minutes with Fox, he has a 69% true shooting percentage. There is no way Terrence Davis keeps that up. He's at 60.6% for the season. So, I do think that his numbers are being bumped a little bit by some hot shooting, but he is a capable scorer. And so at a cheap price tag, if he is going to start and even play 24 to 26 minutes, he's going to look like a good value. I just think that, even though I did play a lot of him last slate, I agree with you that there is a lot of volatility there that people might ignore, especially with him coming off of the big game that he had last time out. It's going to be very easy for people to be like, oh, well, Terrence Davis is going to score 30 points. There's no way around it. And there's a lot of ways around it.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that I projected him poorly on a points per dollar basis. I just didn't give him a ton of minutes. And then it was like, all right, here's a guy where I forget what it was, like 23, 24 fantasy points I had projected for him, which, he was really cheap on DraftKings and FanDuel. That looked good. But I had other guys that were projected for like 22 fantasy points that were like 2 or 3% owned. And they just, to me at least, my process, I was like, well, these seem like better plays where they're comparable and just a 10th of the ownership or a 15th of the ownership. And then, of course, Terrence Davis comes out with a 30% usage rate. Still play, I got his minutes projection right, and it just didn't matter because he crushed in those minutes. But it might not even matter because Kevin Huerter could end up playing, and this all becomes a moot point. But if Kevin Huerter is in, would there be any value plays to look at from the Kings?
Not in the sense of like cheap guys, I don't think. Any of the Huerter, Barnes, Murray range would be playable, but on a 10-game slate, I am very confident there's going to be better options. De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis are always going to look interesting. They're just kind of stuck in this spot where at their respective salaries, they're not going to look like the best plays on a full slate, but they do still have really high ceilings. We saw it from De'Aaron Fox last time out. He had struggled a bit recently, but overall, he's been good this season. He's averaged 1.23 DraftKings points per minute, 28% usage rate, 27% assist percentage for the year. At 8,100, there's a massive ceiling there. And it's even just from the couple of games we've talked about so far, like LaMelo Ball is going to project better than De'Aaron Fox, but he's also probably going to have more ownership. Again, we don't have that yet, but I would expect LaMelo to be more popular than Fox, and Fox is still going to beat him a nice chunk of the time. So it's an interesting tournament play. And then with Sabonis, you run into the issue where he's center only on DraftKings, so the opportunity cost is high. He's 9,600, but in games where he's not in foul trouble, he's playing 35, 36, 37 minutes, and he's a 1.3 DraftKings point per minute guy. So he's someone else where if he does go get 50, 55 DraftKings points, it's not surprising. You just can't project it, and as a result, his ownership's going to be lower, and he's going to be a little bit more difficult to get to. But it makes them both interesting tournament plays.
And I should point out too that Sabonis has been one of my favorite FanDuel plays for a while now because for whatever reason, there's such a big discrepancy on him between FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel's pretty regularly pricing him about $1,000 or so less expensive than DraftKings, but in addition, he gets power forward eligibility. So $8,900 on FanDuel with power forward and center eligibility. He is one of my favorite plays on the FanDuel slate. So what do you make of him on FanDuel where he does have the NP and he's quite a bit cheaper?
Yeah, certainly like him better there. It's just a lot easier to get to him. It is a spot where, I've said it before, and I everyone knows I don't do it all that often. But if you have the time and the means to play multiple sites, this is a perfect example of like why that's useful, because instead of you're just going to naturally, it's not even like hedging, saying like, oh, well, I'm going to play Sabonis here because I don't have him there. It's just like it's kind of like it's just a natural way to diversify. It's going to be tough to prioritize him on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, it's going to be easy. And, I think like the other day, I didn't get to much on DraftKings and I had like 50% or something on FanDuel just because he is a really good play and it's just easier to get there on FanDuel.
So let's talk about the Pistons on the other side of the game. And the team's been a little bit of a mess lately, especially because Cade Cunningham now is officially out for the season. We've seen different starting lineups for the Pistons, but it looks like Jalen Duren is locked into being the starting center, which certainly does make some sense, although it makes less sense that they spent a lot of money on Marvin Bagley in the offseason. But assuming that Duren is going to stick as the starting center, which, number one, do you think that is going to be the case? And then number two, how does he look assuming he is starting at center?
Yeah, I expect him to stick. I think that he looks kind of interesting. He's been like a 0.85 DraftKings point per minute guy. Overall this season, you don't have Bagley on the injury report. He did leave last game early, but appears that he's fine. So I'm basically projecting this as like a 25-23 or 26-22 split in Duren's favor typically. He played 36 minutes last game, which, nice to know that upside is there. But again, Bagley didn't play at all in the second half of that game. In the first half, you got a 6-minute stint to open for Duren. You got 7 to close, so you were looking at around 13, 14 minutes there. And that's in line with that 26 minutes. So that's how I'm going to typically project it. Duren is coming in at 4,400, so the price tag's slowly creeping up. I think it just looks like a decent value, like not a priority. I think you're going to get to Okongwu first, but he is an interesting pivot away from Okongwu within individual lineups, where it's just like, oh, well, I can just get what's probably going to be a pretty sizable ownership discount and just hope that Duren beats Okongwu.
And then what else do you like, if anything, from the Pistons? Because one thing that is kind of hard for me about this team is they run a fairly deep rotation, and they don't have guys that are typically playing 36, 38 minutes. The playing time is kind of spread out. Bogdanovic has been the highest upside guy, but he's become a lot more expensive. Is there anything you really like from the Pistons outside of Duren?
Not really. Bogdanovic is just in this territory now where like he's always a good tournament play. I'll speak for Eric, and I don't even know what the line is on his points, but I assume Eric likes the over. Bogdanovic has just been fantastic without Cunningham this year. Really, really just good offensive player. And so you still just get a high ceiling for him at 6,600, but it's still just difficult to prioritize him. Isaiah Stewart, kind of the same thing, typically going to play 28, 30 minutes. He's 5,400, makes him look decent. Played a ton last game, but again, he benefited from Bagley being out. He got the backup center minutes behind Duren. In the first half, he played about 14 minutes, which is in line with the 28 minutes you expect from him. So it's just a few guys here where Jaden Ivey's down to 5,100. Like, he's not playing a ton of minutes. He's playing typically around 28 in regulation. So it's, to your point, they're just running this really annoying rotation where like everybody has a backup and everybody's backup plays at least like 18 minutes. And so it's problematic, but they are getting cheaper. Jaden Ivey at this point does certainly have a ceiling there. So does Stewart. So does Bogdanovic. Not priorities, but guys that I do think in an appealing game environment are going to be interesting ways to differentiate your lineups.
If you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The next game we have to talk about, the Indiana Pacers against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, from the Pacers side of the game, pretty typical matchup against the Cleveland Cavaliers because they are number one in adjusted defensive efficiency, while also playing at the slowest pace in the league, which overall makes the Cavs really the most difficult matchup you could possibly have. With that in mind, is there anything that really stands out from Indiana?
It's another team where I think there's a couple guys I like. Turner at 6,900 has been somebody that I'm playing a lot of, or not a lot of, but like I'm typically getting over the field because he hasn't been popular recently. So I am interested to see where his ownership ends up coming in because he seems to kind of just get lost in the shuffle. And this is certainly a very, very tough spot against Cleveland. So I don't think he should be popular. I don't think he should be a priority, but he is, a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy that has been playing more minutes recently. So I do find him interesting if he's not getting ownership just because of the upside that he offers. You got 31 and a half minutes from him last game. I think you can kind of start projecting 30 to 32 from him now. We've seen that playing time trend up a bit. And then for Halliburton, you know what you're getting with him. Averages around 34 minutes per game. He's about a 1.4 DraftKings point per minute guy. Still just sitting at 9,400. Not a good matchup, but certainly a very, very good player. So I think the two of them look appealing, especially if they're not really popular. Halliburton, I'm willing to eat a little bit more ownership. Turner, I think you just get so many center options that if he does end up being the one people are playing, you'll just find others that are low owned. But I also don't think Turner will end up being the one that people are playing because the matchup is difficult.
Yeah, and just for reference before when I was bringing up some of the pace, defensive efficiency. So we've got the Cleveland Cavaliers. They played the slowest pace in the NBA. They are about half. They play half a possession less per game compared to the Dallas Mavericks. And then in terms of defensive rating, they are number one by a pretty good margin now, allowing 1.5 less points per 100 possessions than any other team in the league. New Orleans Pelicans actually currently the second best defense. Milwaukee Bucks third. So difficult matchup on paper going up against Cleveland. As for Cleveland themselves as an offense, it's kind of hard to figure out what to do with them as well, because individually we know there's upside in Darius Garland. We know there's upside in Donovan Mitchell, but at the same time as well, they eat into each other. And sometimes if it's a Garland game, Mitchell kind of doesn't really do very much. And then the same thing could be said vice versa. And then you've also got in the front court, Mobley and Jared Allen, when they're both healthy, they kind of cut into each other's production. Is there anything that stands out to you from Cleveland?
I really like the matchup. And like you're saying, there is a lot of talent here. I like the playing time that we've been getting from Jared Allen a lot. He played 36 minutes again last game. He's only 7K. He's another center that really hasn't been picking up much ownership for the most part recently. And I'm really interested to see what happens here because it is an appealing matchup against Indiana. He is playing huge minutes. If you get, 25% ownership coming into Jared Allen at 7K, I would say like, okay, he's a good play, but I can also find lower owned guys that are similar. But if you get another slate where he's going to be 5-6% owned, then I think he's a really appealing option in tournaments. I don't really think the industry has adjusted to him playing so many minutes, and it's not even like faulting the industry. I think it's a situation kind of where like when people are relying on your projections, you need to wait. You need to be a little bit more cautious and like say, all right, Jared Allen, was playing 32, 33 minutes. Now he's playing 36. We can't just start giving him 36. But at the same time, if you, for yourself want to say, I think Jared Allen's playing 36 minutes, it's not a crazy line of thinking because we've seen that very consistently since he came back from injury. So it is a spot where like, I don't even think the industry is wrong, but I do think you, if you wanted to, could push this spot on Jared Allen for a little bit. And it's not a bad spot to do. So Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, 7,800, 8,600. Reasonable prices, kind of in that De'Aaron Fox mold for me. Darius Garland's about a fantasy point per minute guy with Mitchell. He should play 36, 37 minutes. Mitchell's a little over a fantasy point per minute, should play 35, 36. Happy if I get to either of them. Don't think either one ends up being a true priority, but you can certainly throw Garland in the mix with like De'Aaron Fox and LaMelo Ball.
So I'm going to like Jared Allen now for a couple reasons. Number one, what you just said, but then point two, we just got ownership updates. We just got the first run of ownership for the day, and Jared Allen, you had said that if he's 5% owned, he would look appealing in large field tournaments. Well, guess what, Adam? The initial ownership projection on 5%. So you got that mark on the dot for Jared Allen. So you get 5% of him over on DraftKings at 7,000. And then on FanDuel, he is 17% owned, but he's power forward and center eligible over on FanDuel. So I do think 17% a little bit light on him just based on the fact that he has multi-position eligibility there. So Jared Allen does look like the most appealing play to the Cavaliers to me as of now. And I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah. So looking at the ownership for Cleveland, Garland getting 10%, Mitchell getting 9%. Both of those seem fine. The one thing that stands out to me here is Lamar Stevens pulling 13.7%. I get it. He's 3,500. He played 38.5 minutes last game. If Lamar Stevens is going to be popular, this is a spot where I am pretty happy not getting there. I think on average, you're going to get upper 20s in minutes from him. He's not a very good point per minute guy. They did change their rotation up a bit last game. You didn't have Isaac Okoro play in the second half. You didn't have Chetty play at all. So there is some merit to just being like, all right, maybe they're doing something different and Lamar Stevens is actually going to play real starters minutes, in which case he is going to be a good value. But I don't know that I totally want to buy into that after seeing it for one game.
Yeah, we've seen now 13 starts for Lamar Stevens this year, averaging 27.5 minutes per game in those starts. So that is the high watermark for him last game where he played 30 minutes. Like there isn't even a game that's close to that. His other recent games, 24, 31, 26, 26, 27, 15, 27. So he's pretty consistently been in that 27 to 28 minute range. What you said, could this be a thing that happens going forward? Potentially, but I don't think it's very likely.
Right. Like it's nice if you want to play Lamar Stevens, if you're really looking for value, it's nice to know at least that there is a chance that you're just going to get this really condensed rotation. But it's also I try and think of situations like this, like in a month looking back, what would be more surprising? Like, do I expect to look back and just be like, wow, the Cavs haven't played Cedi Osman or Isaac Okoro in a month? Or do I expect to be like, hey, remember that one time Lamar Stevens played 38 minutes? And I think it leans towards the other one. Like you said, looking at all of his other starts this year where both Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell have been active, you had a 34-minute game in the middle of November. Other than that, 29 minutes twice, 28 minutes once. Those were the high marks for him. So even if you want to say, let's go, like I might say, all right, let's instead of going to 26, maybe I'll go to 28 or 30. That would make him look okay, but I'm going to have a really hard time just not giving any minutes to Okoro and giving like 6 or to Cedi and giving like 6 to Okoro.
Yeah, and by the way, shout out to who was it in chat? Somebody had mentioned that Kevin Love also. Yeah, if I had to pick between Lamar Stevens and Kevin Love is $3,600 on DraftKings, picking up 4% ownership. That is a value play I would rather roll the dice with in tournaments than Lamar Stevens.
Yeah, I can't figure out what to make of Kevin Love because he's not playing a lot of minutes, which is fine, but he's not even like the true backup to Jared Allen right now, which is just weird. Like if you told me Kevin Love was playing, 12 to 16 minutes a game, I would assume he's just playing every minute that Allen's not on the floor and playing none alongside Allen. He's actually playing alongside Allen, and he's playing some of the minutes that Allen's not on the floor, but then you're also getting some Mobley at center minutes, which is fine. It's just not what we typically had seen from Cleveland. So on the one hand, it makes me not really confident in Kevin Love, but on the other hand, there's a part of me that's like, all right, you're going to get a game soon where he just plays like 22 minutes because he does play all the backup center minutes and still plays alongside him. It's getting to a spot where it's kind of like it's the Andre Drummond situation where Kevin Love is so cheap now that he could actually get there in 16 minutes. He's capable of it. But the thing that's different than the Andre Drummond situation makes it a little bit more appealing is one, Kevin Love has power forward eligibility, but two, when you talk about Andre Drummond, it's purely he's a really good point per minute guy, and if Vooch gets in foul trouble or loses minutes, Drummond will play more. Love will play minutes alongside Allen, so you're not strictly limited to Jared Allen losing minutes. You also just have outs where the Cavs change their rotation and Kevin Love gets a few more minutes alongside him. So there are other ways to get there other than Jared Allen playing poorly. I do agree that taking some shots on a $3,600 Love makes sense, especially at only 5% ownership.
And shout out, that was SMP 1993 who brought up the Kevin Love point. I wanted to make sure I found that message in the YouTube chat and just pointed out. Because, yeah, I do agree that Kevin Love is somebody who I don't think should project crazy different from Lamar Stevens, but he has less than half the ownership and has multi-position eligibility, whereas Stevens does not. Anything else you want to talk about from Cleveland?
So I just, to illustrate your point. So Lamar Stevens has averaged 0.66 DraftKings points per minute this year. If you give him 30 minutes and ignore matchup and all of that, just for the sake of this, that would be a 19.8 point projection. Kevin Love has averaged 1.15 DraftKings points per minute. So you would need 17 minutes. 17 minutes of Kevin Love equals 30 minutes of Lamar Stevens.
Yeah, which, Lamar Stevens, a couple things working against Lamar Stevens. Number one, he isn't good. But then also, look at who Lamar Stevens has to compete against for usage compared to Kevin Love off the bench competes against for usage. So, it's a really hard situation for Stevens to get shots up. It's hard for Garland and Mitchell to both get their own shots because they play together. Like, where are their shots for Lamar Stevens? It basically never makes sense for Lamar Stevens to take a shot in that starting lineup unless he's wide open.
And even the respective roles they play for the Cavs, one is very useful for fantasy and one is not. Lamar Stevens is a defensive guy. They want him out there because it helps their perimeter defense. They're happy how he's played in that role. His job is not to do shit offensively. Kevin Love's job is to grab a bunch of rebounds and score, and that's a lot more favorable for DFS than guarding guys well.
Next game here is the Orlando Magic against the Boston Celtics, and could be a more difficult matchup coming against the Boston Celtics in the future because Robert Williams is going to be back for them tonight. But starting with the Orlando Magic side, it's just been a team that's been a little bit difficult to parse. But on the positive end, we finally saw the good Markelle Fultz game last time, Adam. He remains $5,100 over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's been priced way up, so he's at $6,500. I think that is about fair. The $5,100 price on Fultz on DK, does that still hold some upside?
Yeah, I still like it. I was I've never been more confident in Markelle Fultz than I was last slate when I got my lineups in and saw that I had only 12% after having 40 and 60 on the two previous slates. That was very obviously going to be when that game came. So, yeah, but he's still projected for 6 to 7% ownership. I don't really get it. He had all of these games where he played fewer minutes than you were expecting, but they were all easily explained by either blowout, injury, or foul trouble, or a combination of multiple of those. Then you get a game last time out where he just comes out and plays 31 and a half minutes. So like, I don't think you project 31 to 32, but I think you go 28 to 30, and at 5,100, that's still going to make him look good. He hasn't been as good so far this year as previous years, but still 0.92 DraftKings points per minute so far this year. He's 1.15 to 1.2 DraftKings points per minute since the start of last year. If you just want to say it comes out to around the fantasy point per minute, you're talking about somebody that projects, again, kind of back of the napkin math for like 6x here, and it's getting 6% ownership. So I expect to go right back to Fultz. Was still 3x the field on him last slate, just annoyed that I wasn't like 10x. It is a difficult matchup here for sure, and there is massive blowout risk. So again, I don't think you project 32 minutes. I'll probably go to 28. It's probably just as likely he plays 22 minutes as it is that he plays 32, but I still like him in tournaments because of the upside if Orlando does happen to be able to hang in this game.
Yeah, and we do still have some of those other backcourt guys out for the Magic. I have no clue what the hell happens here when Jalen Suggs and Gary Harris and Wendell Carter Jr. and all those guys are back healthy, but at least for now, he's not competing with Suggs or Gary Harris for minutes, so that is something that definitely helps a little bit.
Josh and I have talked about it. It feels like the Magic have like 5 players more than you're allowed to have on an NBA roster.
And they play all of them.
And they're all for such a bad team, they have so many actual NBA rotation players. Like, it's not like they're playing, guys that should be in the G League. Like, they're playing NBA guys. They just suck, like, as a team.
Which, I mean, there's so much talent in the NBA now, not to get too far off track here, but that's why I think the NBA is probably going to be expanding in the near future. They have more than enough talent to add a couple teams, throw a Las Vegas team in. So I do think that's going to be coming because so many of these teams are so deep. I mean, the Magic are running in some of these games, I don't know, 10-man rotations, maybe even more, because they've got like Admiral Schofield and Kevon Harris are playing minutes off the bench. And they are guys that I think are capable of being on NBA rosters. And then right now, we do have guys like Chuma Okeke, Jalen Suggs, Jonathan Isaac, Gary Harris, Wendell Carter Jr. These are all solid players. Like they have like 18 guys that are on the roster in the G League that are capable of playing in the NBA. So yeah, it's a lot of guys, and they go deep. It's going to be a mess when everybody's healthy.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the backcourt getting difficult. Jonathan Isaac finally back at practice as well to make the front court miserable in the near future.
There was a point in time where I loved Jonathan Isaac, and I thought he was going to be just a star defensively, but he just barely plays basketball anymore. He's had so many different injuries. They haven't even said what the injuries are. He hurt his knee twice. They needed a hamstring injury, and then there was just no updates, and he never played again. So we'll see what happens there. Anything else from the Magic that you like getting to tonight?
Not really. I mean, it is a brutal spot. To me, it's just a situation where like Banchero at 7,700, Franz Wagner at 6,300. If you land on those guys, sure, but I don't really think that they're underpriced. Whereas I think if Fultz gets full run, he is underpriced. So he's the one that I like getting to the most. Again, there is massive blowout risk here.
Yeah, 13-point spread, widest on the slate by a pretty wide margin. The next widest one is going to be actually the game we talk about after this, the 76ers against the Warriors. But for this spot, we've got the Celtics favored by 13 points. Robert Williams expected to make his return today, which is just insane. The Celtics are already the best team in the NBA, in my opinion, by a very wide margin. And now they're going to be getting their best defensive player back into the mix. Al Horford is questionable. He's been away from the team. But first, if Robert Williams plays, what kind of impact does it have on the front court?
I don't expect it to have a huge impact right out of the gate. I assume he's going to be limited. We also don't know if Al Horford's going to be back. Williams coming in at 4,500. If this were a smaller slate, I'd be inclined to gamble here just because he is a good point per minute guy. But my assumption is you're getting like 16-ish minutes from him when he returns. So like if Horford's in, I think you're just basically getting Robert Williams as the backup. He takes the Luke Cornett minutes. I don't think it has a huge impact right now. I think in the future it's going to make things really it's going to make the Celtics really, 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 really good, and it's going to make things a little bit dicier from a DFS standpoint.
Yeah, and in terms of the minutes, I mean, just guys like Blake Griffin, Luke Cornett, they fall out of the rotation. I don't think that we have to worry about. I guess Derek White could play a couple less minutes, as the Celtics would probably trend towards playing bigger lineups when Horford and Williams are both active. But I don't think this would be anything where there would be key players like a Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum that are going to be impacted. And it's also a slate where I find it hard to pay up for the Celtics guys, just because number one, the blowout risk, but then point two, I think there's going to be other guys I prefer to pay up for today, because when we get into some of the later games, we've got some of the other stars in the league that are on the slate. And as great as Tatum is this year, he's just not as good of a fantasy producer as guys like Anthony Davis or as guys like Nikola Jokic. And it's just hard for me to pay up for him on a lot of these slates.
Yeah, I think that they look interesting in tournaments just because you're not getting much ownership coming into this team. And it is a good matchup. Like, yeah, there's blowout risk, but this team also has a 120-point implied total, and they're not really getting ownership. So from that standpoint, it's interesting. Like, if they do blow out Orlando, there's a good chance that one of Tatum or Brown or Smart or somebody just like goes nuts for their salary. So in tournaments, they're interesting. But, again, there are going to be other spots on the slate that project better. The one thing that stands out to me right now is that Malcolm Brogdon's pulling 16% ownership. That seems a little bit high to me, especially if Horford is back, because it does lower the chances of Brogdon being in the closing lineup. He's a good point per minute guy, but like, to me, Brogdon 4,900, 16% ownership, Fultz 5,100, 6% ownership makes no sense.
But by the way, we got Kylan Heimlin just said, "Do you really say Boston is the best team in the NBA by a wide margin?" LMAO. Yeah, they are.
They are.
They are. So beyond just them having the best record in the NBA, their adjusted net rating is just so far and above every other team. And also, here's the gap in the Boston Celtics offense compared to everybody else. They are number one in adjusted offensive rating. They score 119.4 points per 100 possessions. The second best offense this year has been the Utah Jazz. They score 116.8 points per 100 possessions. Them scoring 2.6 more points per 100 possessions than any other offense is a massive, massive gap. The difference between the first-ranked offense, the Celtics, and the second-ranked offense, the Jazz, is the same between the second and the 12th ranked offense in the NBA. It's a really big margin. They've been incredible this year.
Did not stop me from getting a small bet down on the Grizzlies at 16-1 last night, though.
All right. So the Grizzlies have been another team that I think are one of the better teams in the NBA. Although the Jaren Jackson Jr. game was really annoying for me because I had prop bets on him yesterday, and he played 12 minutes because he got into early foul trouble, and then the game was just a blowout, so he never had to check back in. But yeah, I don't mind the Grizzlies there either. Anything else you want to talk about from the Celtics for tonight?
No.
Okay, so speaking of sports betting, got a pretty good deal with BetMGM right now, where if you guys sign up by clicking on the link that we have below, also it's going to be thrown into the YouTube chat in a second, you're going to get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. But in addition, a $10 deposit when your first bet settles, you are going to get 2 free months of a Stokastic Plus Platinum package. So that's a lot of value at BetMGM. 2 free months of all the tools we have over at Stokastic: player projections, ownership projections, boom bust tool. And then we also got our lineup generator now. We're just a couple clicks of the button. It is going to generate a bunch of lineups for you that we are expecting to be plus EV in just an instant. So a lot of good value here signing up at BetMGM, but just make sure you click on that link when you do sign up, because you're going to need that to get your $1,000, up to $1,000 risk-free bet, as well as getting your 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Now, the next game to talk about on the slate here, we got the Golden State Warriors against producer Mike's Philadelphia 76ers. And Warriors, a bit of a mess right now because Steph Curry, shoulder injury, appears to be fairly severe. He's expected to miss about a month, potentially even more. And then we've also got Draymond Green questionable. And this could be a really shorthanded Warriors team that is going to potentially really struggle to pick up wins in the short term. What do you make of the Warriors tonight with no Steph Curry and Draymond Green also being iffy?
Yeah, it makes them look very good. I am glad, sort of, that DraftKings bumped up the price on Jordan Poole to 8,200 because he should play a huge role for as long as Curry is out. FanDuel has him at 7,700, so they bumped him up from last time as well, just not as far as DraftKings did. He looks good to me. It's more of a correct price tag, but you're going to get whatever minutes Klay Thompson isn't on the floor, you're probably going to have Jordan Poole out there. He has like a 24% usage rate without Curry or Thompson on the floor. You're also going to get a ton of usage when he is playing alongside Thompson, because, obviously Thompson's a lower usage guy than Steph is. So I do like Poole. They did raise the price, so it's not the same level of priority. He's in the mix now with guys like De'Aaron Fox, LaMelo Ball, Darius Garland. So it's tough to point and just say like, oh, Jordan Poole, got to play him everywhere. But he is another guy in that mix that looks pretty good, which actually I just wanted to check. So we have LaMelo right now getting 24% ownership. We have 5% coming to Poole. We have 10 coming to Garland, and we have 7 coming to Fox. So between just those 4 guys that we've already talked about, I think it makes for a really interesting situation in tournaments, because I agree with the order the field has them in, but at the same time, Jordan Poole is going to win that group a relatively high percentage of the time. So it just makes for a really interesting situation with all these very good guards priced around each other. Thompson at 7,100 is going to look good as well. He's been playing huge minutes recently, even with Curry in. You've been getting a lot of 36, 37-minute games from him. So I think that, Curry being out certainly is likely to help there. It's not like he's being replaced with a low usage guy, but Poole's still, certainly not Curry. So I like Clay. He's getting the most ownership on this team right now. I think that makes sense. Without Curry on the floor this year, only 101 minutes for Thompson. Also only a 23% usage rate. So that is kind of interesting. Again, Poole just does take a lot of that usage, but you're not getting crazy ownership coming into Thompson. So I still think he looks pretty good.
And then what happens if Draymond ends up sitting? Because we've seen some really odd and weird mixes of different starting lineups. We've seen, Kuminga start at times. So DiVincenzo draw a start recently. If Green doesn't play, is there a value play that you think he'll be honing in on from Golden State?
Maybe. It kind of depends on who starts in his place. We've seen Jonathan Kuminga mostly be the backup to Kevon Looney lately. So I don't know, if Green is out, if they go to Anthony Lamb, you would get a $3,900 Lamb, which, if you want to roll the dice, sure. But I'd be more interested if it were Kuminga starting. But Kuminga's also up to $4,900 on DraftKings. So I think it's going to be risky. We know Steve Kerr likes to sort of mix things up with these backups when they step into bigger roles. But we have seen Kuminga play a pretty firm role in the rotation recently as Looney's backup. If they started him alongside Looney, I would certainly be happy to get to some Kuminga. If they go to Anthony Lamb, I'd be a little bit less interested. Just because I think he's more. If they started Kuminga, I think there's a good chance you're just getting 30 plus minutes from Kuminga. If they start Lamb, I think it's more likely you're getting 24 and you're just getting a mix of other guys.
And anything else you want to talk about from the Warriors?
Nope.
All right, so let's move on to the Philadelphia 76ers, the second biggest favorite on today's slate. And they've really been rolling lately because Harden's playing really well. Embiid is playing really well. We've got D'Anthony Melton. He is going to be back. He is off the injury report today. We still got Tyrese Maxey out. There was kind of a bleak update on him yesterday where they said he's still weeks away from returning. So it doesn't seem like Maxey's going to be back in the fold anytime soon. But at least as far as Embiid and Harden go, each of them have individually shown to have upside. How do you like them as pay-up options?
I like them quite a bit, especially because they are somehow not pulling ownership here. I get it's a 10-game slate, but these guys both play huge minutes. They're both very good point-per-minute guys. Golden State's a fast-paced team. Harden coming in at 9,900, Embiid coming in on DraftKings at 11,500. You're typically just getting 38-plus minutes from Harden. You're getting 35, 36 minutes from Embiid. Embiid's been a 1.5 to 1.6 DraftKings point per minute guy with Harden. Harden is 1.2 to 1.3 DraftKings points per minute with Embiid. I like getting to both guys, especially if they're not going to pull ownership. Outside of that, I have basically nothing from Philly.
We've got an interesting super chat here from Alomar Davenport. He's saying that on FanDuel, he's a 20 max single entry player. So he's playing generally, I guess this means 20 lineups in some of the large field tournaments, then also plays single entry. But also, he's been putting 150 lineups in the 5 cent for practice. By the way, I think is very advisable for anybody who's starting in DFS or is kind of tinkering around with playing max entry. There are FanDuel tournaments you can play with basically zero cost to them. There's, that 5 cent tourney, ones that you only have to pay a couple of dollars to work and figure out how to build 150 lineups. So we said last night he ended up with top lineups in the 5 cent that would have been top 5 lineups in the 20 max. So we want to know, how do you decide which lineups you place, Adam, from your 150 max field into say a 20 max tournament? So if you're playing 20 lineups, say the $4 on DraftKings, how would you decide which of those out of your 150 lineups you're paying in a 150 max tournament that you go into your 20 max?
So for me, I play the top 20 lineup. So what I think are my 20 best large field tournament lineups are the ones that go in the 20 max for me. I think you could make a case that maybe you could adjust. So it's hard. It's hard to. So I rank my lineups based on things like ownership and projection, and get an idea. I make a lot of lineups and then get an idea of which lineups I think are the best that I can play in tournaments, and then I play the top 20 in 20 max, and I play the top 150 and 150 max. I think you could make a case to maybe weight ownership a little bit less in 20 max, just because people are playing 20 lineups instead of 150, but they're still large field tournaments, so I weight it equally, and so I just end up playing my top 20 there and my top 150 in 150 max, whereas single entry 3 max I'm certainly weighting projection more.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly in something like a 5-cent tournament, and then playing in some lower stakes stuff as well. It looks like you're playing over on FanDuel. I think the easiest thing you could do also is if you sort your lineups by projection, especially at lower stakes. I think that's a pretty simple way to go about it, particularly at lower stakes. Would that make sense to you?
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully that answers your question, Alamar. If not, message me on Twitter and we could go through that in a little bit more detail. As for the 76ers, I know you mentioned that really the only two guys you had interested in, Embiid, Harden, but anything else you want to bring up here?
No.
All right. The next game we have here is the Brooklyn Nets against the Toronto Raptors. And as far as some of these games that are upcoming are concerned, much less injury news to go on. We do have Seth Curry is listed as questionable for the Nets, but beyond that, Royce O'Neal is returning from injury. The Nets look like one of the least appealing spots on the slate for me, especially now that we've got Ben Simmons back in the mix and playing more minutes, then Nick Claxton, him being healthy at center. Is there anything you do really like from the Nets?
No, not particularly. We haven't seen them play in a while, so they're rested. But yeah, Simmons played 23 minutes last game. Claxton was in; he played 26. There's been a lot of plays that I like on this slate, and there's not much that stands out from the Nets. Like, obviously, you can say if you get to Kevin Durant, great. But even between him and Jason Tatum, I think I would probably go to Tatum first. I do think it's close. Kyrie Irving is just another guard you can throw into that 8K range. He's 8,500, getting 6% ownership. So it's Irving, Durant, I think look good, but not better than like a lot of other options. If you want to roll the dice on a Claxton or a Simmons, they're both fine. But I think I'm with you. This is one of the least appealing teams to me.
On the other side with the Toronto Raptors, and the Raptors, no OG Anunoby right now. He's out. And I'm still stunned at the minutes that Gary Trent played last game, because typically whenever players are out for the Raptors, it just means Nick Nurse does his Nick Nurse thing where it's just like, hey, we play all of our guys like 40 minutes now. But for whatever reason, Gary Trent only played 25 minutes last game. I don't know what to make of it. He played 44 minutes the game before. Do we just consider last game a fluke and assume that Trent goes back to playing massive minutes?
That's how I'm viewing it. Like, I'm not going to project him for 40 minutes or anything, but I'll probably still go back to, 35, 36 for him. He has he was in foul trouble last game for one. He picked up 3 fouls in the second quarter, lost like 4 minutes of playing time. But other than that, he just sort of played short rotations. He has sort of been on Nick Nurse's shit list for a lot of the year. You did get Hernan Gomez back last game too, and he played a lot of minutes. And they were pretty much the minutes that Trent wasn't playing. So I do think that's concerning, and a reason maybe to walk Trent's minutes back a bit is that you just got this extra body that was taking those minutes. So that actually is I think worth noting. Hernan Gomez played every single minute that Trent wasn't on the floor. So I might actually walk Trent back to 32 or something and give Hernan Gomez 16.
Then pay up options, Siakam, Van Vliet, Scotty Barnes. They've been made more expensive now at this point across FanDuel and DraftKings. Still upside there. We saw Fred Van Vliet go for over 60 fantasy points last game. As far as the more expensive guys go, are you willing to pay the price tags on them?
Yeah, especially because they're not getting ownership, and these guys play so many minutes, and it's a nice matchup against the Nets as well. Pascal Siakam was 20% owned last slate at this same price tag. I get that he's expensive, and there's a lot of other routes you can go, but this is still someone that in a competitive game is likely to play north of 40 minutes and averages well over a fantasy point per minute this year. He's playing great. I still at 4% ownership. I'm interested there. Scotty Barnes at 7,500, point guard and small forward eligible, getting 3% ownership. Played 40 minutes last game, played I think 41 or 42 the game before that. That's really interesting to me. Same goes for Fred VanVleet, another 8K point guard, 5% ownership, likely to play 40 minutes. He's been around a fantasy point per minute guy this year in the games that Siakam has played. I like getting to Toronto if they're not going to get ownership.
Yeah, I think you could definitely make a case for some of those guys individually. Not that there's anybody who I'd be getting to a massive amount of, but big minutes should be.
Thaddeus Young started in place of Christian Koloko last game, played between 27 and 28 minutes. He's 3,400. He is center only on DraftKings, which sucks, but it's still going to be a good point per dollar value if he starts. On FanDuel, he's 5K power forward. So there's a there's like a glaring negative on both sites. On FanDuel, it's that he's 5K. On DraftKings, it's that he's only a center, but he is still a reasonable value, I think, on either side if he starts.
Next game here is the New York Knicks against the Chicago Bulls. Now, from the Knicks side of the game, team is pretty healthy right now. Obi Toppin's out, but not necessarily a massive needle mover, and he's been out for a little bit of an extended period of time now. And the one guy who I think remains a little bit underpriced, Julius Randle, particularly over on FanDuel. We've got Randle with power forward and center eligibility, only $8,300. So he's somebody who I think looks pretty strong there. On DraftKings, Randle also is somebody who's viable, but a little more expensive at $8,700. And then also, if I'm not mistaken, only has power forward, does not also have the center eligibility, although power forward, much more valuable to have than the center eligibility. But what do you make of Randle, who I think is pretty clearly the top option for the Knicks at the moment?
Yeah, I think so as well. You're getting huge minutes from him with Obi Toppin out, and Toppin is still out. So that's great. There have been two negatives about Julius Randle this year compared to previous years from a DFS standpoint, because he's been very good from a real life standpoint. But one is that Jalen Brunson cuts into his assist percentage. Jalen Brunson is in, so that's still an issue. But the other was that you were getting Obi Toppin as Julius Randle's straight backup. Neither of them were playing center minutes. So it was a situation where unless Obi Toppin is going to play 8 minutes a night, Julius Randle's not going to get to 40. In previous years, you were getting like 38 minutes in games from Randle. This year, you're getting 33, 34 because Toppin was just always going to play 14 or 15 minutes. Without Toppin, you're getting back to that 36 to 40 minute range pretty consistently for Julius Randle. So the price tag is rising, but it's deserved with Toppin being out. And I still think he looks like a good option here. Pretty solid spot for the Knicks as well. So Randle pulling 10% ownership, that seems about right to me. 18% coming into Jalen Brunson is interesting because at 6,800, I do think he's a good play, but we've talked about all these 8K guys that just aren't getting ownership. And it seems like one big reason for that is that people are just funneling to Jalen Brunson for a little bit less, which is great. But it's also typically not that difficult to find $1,200 or so on a 10-game slate. So it is interesting to me if, maybe you play a little bit less Jalen Brunson and a little bit more of De'Aaron Fox, Jordan Poole, Kyrie, all those guys. So Fred VanVleet. So that is one interesting spot to pay attention to. I think Brunson's a good play, but maybe getting a little bit more ownership than he should relative to the other guard options. As far as the rest of the team, RJ Barrett also actually benefiting from Toppin being out typically. He's been playing a bit more. Only played 34 minutes last game, but also dealt with some foul trouble. So typically you've been seeing him play longer stints and getting up, 36, 38 minutes. So he looks decent at 6,800 as well. Mitchell Robinson, if he avoids foul trouble, is typically going to give you around 30 minutes. He's a center. He's 4% owned. You can take some shots in tournaments. He gives you plenty of upside because of his block ability, but also there's a lot of centers.
Yeah, I'm realizing as we're talking through this, there's a lot of good plays right in that price range at guard. We've got Fred VanVleet 8,000. We've got De'Aaron Fox 8,100. LaMelo Ball 8,000. So a lot of guys that are priced right around there that I think are favorable. And I also do prefer to Brunson. Brunson $6,800 on DraftKings, a little bit cheaper, but I do think I'm probably going to end up paying up for those other guys a little bit more than Brunson $7,600 over on FanDuel. But we'll see later in the day by the time deep dive live before lock rolls around. where some of my priorities end up lying. Chicago Bulls on the other side of this game, a team that's just been pretty difficult to figure out some of the usage on. DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Vooch, all three of these guys we've seen with upside at times. Although, at least as of late, LaVine has played a little bit better and seems to be somebody who's produced a little more value from a fantasy perspective. But how are you going to be handling the Bulls tonight?
Just taking shots on good players that, the issue with the Bulls is that DeRozan, Vooch, LaVine, they all cut into each other. And so from a median projection standpoint, none of them are going to look great. LaVine is the only one pulling real ownership here at 16%. And that's because he's down to $7,300, which is just clearly a little bit cheap for a guy that's going to play 34 to 36 minutes and averages a little bit over a fantasy point per minute. But, DeMar DeRozan, 8,300, Vooch, 7,300, both pretty much priced correctly. Vooch, a little underpriced in terms of his projection, but then when you factor in the opportunity cost of center, I would say he's pretty much correctly priced. So from a median standpoint, they don't really stand out, but games don't play out that way. On a game-to-game basis, you're going to get the game where DeRozan takes over, or the game where Vooch takes over, or the game where LaVine takes over, and that's the kind of stuff you can target in tournaments because the fact that their median projections don't look great is going to pull the ownership down for the most part and make it so that because people don't account for volatility enough. So it's just going to make it so there's not enough ownership coming in. So it does make it a pretty interesting team to target in tournaments. Vooch and DeRozan in particular, 10% ownership for DeRozan, 7% for Vooch. I do like LaVine. He's probably where I get to the most just because he is 7,300 shooting guard. So I think those three guys look good. Other than that, nothing I really like. Patrick Williams has been starting. He's 4K. We're probably going to end up with better value than that by the time we get to lock.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we could end up with better value is because in the next game, we've got some key news. The Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is the spot that I think is going to cause the most late swapping today. It's going to be the news that in all likelihood we're most likely be waiting on later on the day because it's a later start time, and we've got Rudy Gobert questionable and D'Angelo Russell questionable for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think both their status is pretty much up in the air. I consider them to be real true 50-50s at the time that we're talking about this. Who stands to benefit the most from the Timberwolves if Russell and or Gobert are not able to play?
So if Gobert doesn't play, it's really easy because the answer is Naz Reid. He's 4K. He is only center eligible on DraftKings, which again sucks. Like it's right, but it sucks from a fantasy standpoint because if he was power forward, you could just literally plug him in everywhere. He's also center only on FanDuel, which is actually kind of crazy because they make Jared Allen a power forward and Domantas Sabonis a power forward. So I don't know how Naz Reid isn't, but either way, Naz Reid's going to look good. He's a very good point per minute guy. The reason that we never play him outside of small slates in DFS is just because he backs up Rudy Gobert, so there's not enough minutes there. But if Gobert is out, Reid's going to look very good. 1.12 DraftKings points per minute in 327 minutes so far this season. If Russell is out, it becomes dicier. You get more scoring opportunities for Anthony Edwards. He already sees a bump without Karl Anthony Towns. If you take out Russell as well, it just becomes even easier for Edwards to take over and have a big game. He is pretty expensive, coming in at 8,900 on DraftKings, getting 9% ownership. If Russell is out, he certainly looks better. Shooting guard, small forward as well. But then when you look to the backups, that's where it kind of gets tough. Like Jalen Noel certainly has a path to more minutes. He played 25 minutes last game. That game also was sort of non-competitive at the end. The starters subbed out with 2.5 minutes to go. So we might have seen Noel close that game. Not guaranteed, but could have. He did close the first half. So if Russell is out, you have Noel at 4,600. He'd be an interesting play in tournaments. He's not safe because, again, you could just get like 25, 26 minutes. But the upside is that you also do have a path to more than that. And he is a good point per minute guy. We know that we don't have Jordan McLaughlin, so there are backup guard minutes available. Austin Rivers started. He played 29 minutes. He's awful from a fantasy standpoint. Wendell Moore played like 14 minutes outside of garbage time. He's not somebody that I'm looking to get to from fantasy. So it's kind of tough, the rotation that they went with without Russell, because Forbes, Moore, and Rivers are all just terrible point per minute guys, and you can't really do anything with them. Jalen Noel's the guy that you really want to play, but they didn't give him as many minutes as you would like. So it makes him a little bit riskier. But if Russell's out, I think Noel's the guy most likely to step into more minutes, and Edwards steps into more production.
Yeah, and another guy who plays a bigger role is Kyle Anderson. He is so popular on FanDuel to a point where it just seems insane to me because, all right, he's somebody who is going to be projecting well today, but he's 60% owned on FanDuel at $5,500. Play him in cash games. That seems like an insane amount of ownership in tournaments.
Yeah, it is, especially when you think about like who Kyle Anderson is. But on the other hand, it makes sense. Like he's playing huge minutes with Karl Anthony Towns out, and if Russell / Gobert are out, those minutes are even more solidified because it just makes it more difficult for Minnesota to run any sort of rotation that takes those minutes away from him. So if Russell and Gobert are in, I still think the most likely outcome is you're getting low to mid 30s from Kyle Anderson, who is not a bad fantasy producer. Without Russell or Towns this year, is at 0.82 DraftKings points per minute, but overall 0.88 DraftKings points per minute. He's not a high usage guy, but he's efficient enough. He rebounds well enough. He gets enough assists. He just gets it done across, a variety of categories. So I understand why he's getting ownership based on the minutes and just the reasonable price tag. But it is always scary when you talk about a bunch of ownership coming into a guy that isn't a great point per minute guy, and you're relying on him playing a bunch of minutes. If for any reason those minutes go south, whether it's foul trouble, which just happens, or a random weird rotation, it's not the kind of guy that's likely to really make it back up because he's not a great point per minute guy. So I always get scared when there's a lot of ownership coming into somebody like Kyle Anderson. I understand it. He's a good point per dollar option, but I also typically can find other guys that are a lot lower owned that I think are similar enough.
Yeah, that's where I stand as well. Kyle Anderson, not that he's a bad play points per dollar, but I mean, there's a breaking point where the ownership is too high, and 60% is certainly it for me as far as FanDuel is concerned with Kyle Anderson. Now, on the other side of this game of the Oklahoma City Thunder, we've got SGA always as a viable pay-up option, Josh Giddey in the mix, and then the role players have just kind of been difficult to parse for this team. But Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is out, Kenrich Williams is out. Does it make it easier to identify any cheap plays we want to get to from the Thunder?
Not really, because it's still the Thunder, but Usman Jang also out for the foreseeable future, so that's another body that they don't have. But last game, even with Robinson Earl out, you still got like a million man rotation, and Jang wasn't in it. They played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, they played 11 guys last game. 5 minutes to Trey Mann, 8 to Omaruri. Everyone else played, 8 to Pokashevsky, which just reiterates how ridiculous this team is. Like when Robinson Earl was ruled out, the immediate talking point was like, oh, Pokashevsky's minutes might actually be safe. And then like 2 games later, he plays 8 minutes. So it's just really, really difficult still to trust anything from this team outside of what's been the case all year. SGA at 9,700, you can trust him. He looks good. The minutes are going to be there. 7,200 for Giddey is fine. I'm kind of surprised how much ownership is coming into the rest of OKC though. Pokashevsky right now projected for 11% ownership. Great. Like he's cheap. And if he plays 24 plus minutes, he's going to be good, but he just played 8 minutes. Like there's no guarantee he's getting, what we need from him. Dort, 5,200 pulling 16%. He's very similar to Anderson for me. I think he's a good point per dollar play. I'm also not particularly scared of not having a lot of a popular Lou Dort. Darius Baisley at 3,500, pulling 29%. He started last game. He played 30 minutes. If he starts again, I do feel good going to him. He has power forward eligibility on DraftKings as well, which is really nice. If he goes back to the bench, you're probably looking at like 18 to 20 minutes where he'd be okay, but certainly a lot riskier. So that's a spot to pay attention to. Jalen Williams has been playing pretty big minutes consistently. He played another 30 last game as a starter. He's 4,600, pulling 13% ownership. So for me, I trust Gilgeous-Alexander, Giddey, and Dort's minutes within reason. Jalen Williams and Baisley, if they are the other 2 starters, I think are good plays. Poku scares the shit out of me if he's coming off the bench. If he starts, I like him more. He's still scary, but I like him more. So yeah, it's a team where they're cheap. I guess I do understand why they're getting ownership, but at the same time, it's really scary because these rotations suck.
Sponsor of today's show is Prize Picks. And if you guys have wanted to find a way to get some money on sports bets, but sports betting isn't legal in your state, good news, because you probably get access to Prize Picks. And when you sign up on Prize Picks by using our link, which you find below or about to be thrown into the YouTube chat, you can get up to $100 on your first deposit as a bonus. But in addition, you get 1 free month of Stokastic plus Platinum. So some good value to be had there as well. But just make sure to use our link when you sign up, because if your options are no free money when you first deposit or up to $100 in the deposit bonus, you want to take advantage of that deposit bonus, We also have tools over at stokastic.com, like our prize picks player prop tool, that's going to make it really easy for you to identify who the best props are to play over at prize picks. We've got percentage odds of each player hitting the over-unders on their props. So you could use them to build out some profitable prop cards over on prize picks. A couple games left here to talk about, Adam, and the next one, it's going to be one that's hard for me to really find a lot of interest in, starting with the Portland Trailblazers side. I think there's better pay-up options than Damian Lillard today. The pace is going to be relatively slow for a Blazers game because the slowest pace team in the NBA is the Cleveland Cavaliers. Second slowest pace is the Dallas Mavericks. But is there anything we should be looking at with a strong consideration from the Blazers?
I don't really think so. I think it goes without saying that Damian Lillard is certainly capable of just breaking a slate. He's insanely good. The issue that I have, though, with even saying like, oh yeah, I want to target Lillard at no ownership is I've already named like 6, 8K point guards that I think are really good plays because of how low owned they are. Lillard being at 10-3, I think is pretty much the correct price tag. And like you said, it's a really, really slow Dallas team. So Lillard does have a massive ceiling, but so do plenty of other guys that are less expensive. Nurkic, same sort of thing. He's 7,200. He's fine, but there's a lot of centers in that range that I would rather play. Did play 30.5 minutes last game. That's a positive. Fully healthy Blazers team and still getting a lot of minutes from Nurkic is good. But no, I think overall this is one of, if not the most appealing team, least appealing teams that we've talked about.
And on the other side, the chalkiest play on DraftKings tonight is Christian Wood. He's currently projected for 40% ownership, fairly popular on FanDuel as well, projected for 31% ownership. We've had a lot of teases that Christian Wood is going to end up starting. Is this actually going to be the spot?
I don't think so.
So he started the second half of last game and played 35 minutes. That is the reason why we are seeing such a high ownership projection on him. So what are you going to be doing with Wood in large field tournaments, considering all the ownership he's picking up then?
So if he does start, then I would certainly like him more. I'll lead with that. But even if he's coming off the bench, I like him at 6K. I don't think he needs to start to be a good option here. Maxi Kleba is out. So like even in the first half last game where he came off the bench, Wood played 7 minutes in the first quarter. He played 6 minutes in the second quarter. I think you would project like around 28 minutes or so if he comes off the bench. I think you go north of 30 if he starts. The reason I don't think he starts is that, one, I really think Jason Kidd doesn't like Wood having to go up against like starting centers because of from a defensive standpoint. And two, or 1A, Yusuf Nurkic is going to destroy Christian Wood if he starts. So I think he comes off the bench, but even in 28 minutes, Christian Wood's going to look good. And again, if he starts, he looks even better. 37% ownership is a lot, but again, like I kind of get it. If he's starting, I definitely get it. If he's coming off the bench, I think he's a good play. I don't think he is 7 times better than Jared Allen or Miles Turner or these other guys that, are like $1,000 more expensive. So Wood definitely underpriced. I think he's a good play. It is a spot where if I'm looking to differentiate in a tournament lineup, it's one of the first spots I'll probably look to if Wood continues to pull this much ownership.
And then as for Luka as a pay-up option, it kind of the same conversation you and I have had a whole bunch with Luka this year, which is he's very expensive, particularly on DraftKings. He is $12,300. So actually has come down a little bit from some of the other spots that we've seen him at. Over on FanDuel, he's much more reasonably priced, flat 12,000 point guard and shooting guard eligibility. If a bunch of value opens up, it's going to be a lot easier to get to Luka, and he looks like a great pay-up option. If a lot of these guys who are questionable ultimately end up playing, it's going to be harder to get to Luka. It just depends how much value is available on the slate because he's always going to project better or at least comparably to every other player on any slate.
Yeah, so this is the opposite of yesterday where, we talked about Giannis, and obviously Giannis ended up sucking. That game was just insanely bad. But we talked about it yesterday where paying that premium for Giannis was more appealing than on, bigger slates, because if Giannis scores 65, there's a very good chance that he just, blows everybody else out of the water. It's the opposite here, where if Luka goes out there and does score, 65 DraftKings points, there's a pretty good chance that one or two of these guards that are, 2 to 4K cheaper score 50, 55, 60 as well. And, and allow you to build a much better lineup. So with it being such a large slate, you need those 80-point games from 75, 80-point games from Luka. He certainly can get there, and he's getting, 8% ownership. It's just it's a situation where, if you get Luka in a lineup, he's clearly a good play. You're never wrong for playing Luka. I just expect that I like my lineups more where, if I build them with Luka and then I say, all right, well, what happens if I drop Luka down and increase whoever my worst player is, I'm probably just going to like that second lineup better.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And one of the reasons why I haven't played as much of Luka on DraftKings as I had in previous years, he's just been more expensive. One game left to talk about on the slate. It is the Denver Nuggets against the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, Jokic has been playing out of his mind as of late and arguably had the best game of the entire season last time out, where he ended up finishing like 85% of his shots from the field. Rebounds were there, assists were there, defensive stats. So all in all, Jokic last game finished with 82 fantasy points, but it was just a really well-rounded line for Jokic going up against the Washington Wizards. How does he look as a pay-up option for you today, considering now that we've seen 80-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games from him?
He looks like a pay-up option that I'm going to have trouble getting to, and then is going to beat me at the end of the night, because this is another spot where he should go absolutely nuts against the Lakers. The issue that I run into here, it's similar to the Luka issue, where he is really expensive, but you also have one less roster spot that you can use on him as well compared to Luka. You also have Joel Embiid, who's a little bit less expensive, and again, Jokic coming off of an absolutely amazing game. Everybody knows Jokic can do that. But Joel Embiid, when you take a step back, is basically the same point per minute guy this year as Jokic, and he actually averages more minutes per game. Embiid also not getting ownership, a little bit less. So I think even when I do manage to pay up at center for a low-owned guy, I probably get Embiid before I get Jokic, which pains me because I love Jokic, and I love Embiid too, but there's a part of me that hates Embiid just because people want to compare him to Jokic and claim he's better, like our producer probably. So I love getting to Jokic. I just think it's going to be tough. Basically everything I said about Luka a minute ago, but then also the fact that I think I probably just get to Embiid more at that same price point.
And then is there anything else that really stands out to you from Denver? Jamal Murray, he appears to be back at full health, but we've already talked about so many guards that I'm just not sure he makes the cut.
Yeah, same boat, 7K. I do think he's another one where he's just getting a little bit more ownership than he probably should. I think he's a good play. He's getting 14% ownership on DraftKings, kind of like Jalen Brunson. I get why people are going to go there, especially right now. There's not a ton of value. So he makes sense, but also I just think that there are so many low-owned guards that aren't that much more difficult to get to. One spot that I would point to here is Aaron Gordon at 6,400, getting 5% ownership. He's been playing incredibly well recently. He's been more aggressive offensively. You're getting 30 to 32 minutes from him. I think he's a pretty interesting play here in a good spot against the Lakers.
Yeah, and it's once again, I think there's a lot of guys on Denver that have upside, just maybe not as much as some of the other players that we've talked about. There's all these mid-upper price guards that I'm going to ultimately end up preferring to Jamal Murray. And then the center spot, once again, always kind of makes it tough when there's a lot of value there to prioritize a spend-up option. So hopefully Jokic doesn't go for 80 fantasy points again, because there's a good chance I'm just not going to end up playing a whole ton of them because of the position. Now, on the other side, when it comes to the Lakers, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, individually, obviously they both have upside. Are you going to be prioritizing anything from the Lakers?
No. Davis, obviously great. LeBron, great. LeBron is 9,800, which is kind of interesting, but I still don't think I'm going to get to a lot of that. It's just when they both play, they cut into each other enough that it's tough to prioritize. If I got to one, it probably would be LeBron, just because he does have small forward, power forward eligibility, and he is sub 10K. So that is nice. He is the only guy getting ownership at 12%, but we also have him with a 7% chance of being optimal. So I think he's going a little bit over owned.
Anything else from the Lakers here, whether it's any of the role players to get to? It's not quite the same as the Thunder, but it's kind of the same in terms of trying to figure out some of the minutes and where the production might go to.
Yeah, there's nothing else that I like. It's a bunch of bad players that don't get a lot of production because they're playing with Davis and LeBron.
All right, that is going to do it for us today, guys. If you haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got a lot of other content as well today. We've got NFL on the contrary, NBA deeper dive later on the day, NBA live before lock. So check out all of that later. But until then, good luck, and I hope to see you guys tonight.